Hi, welcome to Integrating with Microsoft Teams Data using Microsoft Graph. I'm Nick Kramer. Today we'll talk about how to build an app using Teams Graph. To illustrate this, we've built an app that will integrate your conversations with stock data as their example app. And we'll use tags and presence to find some experts and figure out their status so we can ask some stock questions to them. We'll use chat APIs to create a conversation with those experts. We'll use resource-specific consent permissions to give our app least privilege and enable the most people to install it. We'll schedule meetings to talk with our experts about our topics. We'll use activity feed APIs to let you know about changes to those stocks. And we'll use messaging APIs to archive the conversation. For those who aren't familiar with Graph already, Graph is our REST APIs for working with the data in Microsoft. And so you can use these APIs to put your data into those experiences, but also use these APIs to take that data and put it into your own experiences. So your own websites, your own bots, your own apps that have no UI, even command line apps. So all those are places you can use that Graph API. So to give you an idea of some of the things that are possible, we put together a demo.
This is an app called Contoso Trade, or C-Trade for short. It's a stock investment app, and I'm considering investing in Fabricam, but I'm not sure what would happen to the stock price if the tariffs are raised on steel imports. So let's find someone who does know. There's a Get Help button, and C-Trade uses the Graph API to look at the tags on the users and figure out who's an expert in what. And then it uses the Presence APIs to figure out which of those experts are available. I need a tariff expert. Looks like Patty is available, so unclick on her. When I do that, note how C-Trade has created a conversation with Patty and sets the context by putting an adaptive card in the chat explaining what she needs to know about Fabricam. I then type in my question, what will happen to Fabricam if tariffs are raised on steel imports? Note also that C-Trade has already pinned a tab for us, allowing me and Patty to easily get back to the full C-Trade application, should that card not give us enough information. All right, Patty got it back to us. Carbon steel, alloy steel, tool steel, or stainless steel? I'm not sure what to do with that one. Okay, I can do that. I can set up a meeting with the power of C-Trade. It will use Graph APIs to find the nearest slot and set up a meeting with a calendar invite for it. All right, 4 p.m. we can do that. That's right around the corner. All right, so let's go into our meeting. All right, so I have a good conversation with Patty about the various types of steel imports. Oh, look at this. Price of Fabricam has gone up while we're talking. It's even more important than ever that we close this deal. So let's exit out of the meeting. And we'll use the meeting chat to work with the C-Trade bot to make the purchase. Let's buy 2 million shares. And there we have it. By using Graph to create conversations about entities, we've not just talked about work, we've gotten work done.
Let's talk about how we built this. The first step for building this user experience was to figure out which users had which expertise. And so we used the upcoming tags APIs to figure that out. With the tags APIs, you can figure out which members in an organization have a given tag, such as bankruptcy or the risk management tag or the tag. And so for each of those tags, you say get teams/id/tags/id/members, and you get back a list of those people with that tag. And we're working on a full set of APIs for work tags, both reading and writing tags, not for enumerating the particular users with the tag, but also what are the possible tags in a team. The second step of building this user experience was figuring out the presence of these users. Are they online? Are they in a meeting? Are they away from their desk? You do post/communications/get presences by user ID, allows you to get the presence of multiple users in a single API call, and then you get back the answers there. Again, we have a full complement of APIs. We have for both reading and getting notified in real time of changes to those presences. Next step in our demo was to build a chat. We have a full set of APIs for managing your chat lifecycles. These are relatively new APIs that join our existing channel APIs for doing similar things. So you can now create a chat thread, add users to that chat thread, install apps and tabs into your chat thread, send messages to your chat thread. And then when the time comes, you can read those messages out again, store them in your system of record, and move on to the next chat thread. So here's our chat APIs. For the chat covers both one-on-one and group chats, and then we have a similar set of APIs for working with teams and channels. When we created a chat thread, we did post/chats. First thing we specified was a chat type. You can do either one-on-one chat or a group chat. And then you specify the members. The first user we put in there was ourselves, and the second user was the person to talk to. After we created the chat thread itself, we sent a message to that chat thread. So post/chats/the ID that the previous message returned back to us, and then /messages. In there, we need to specify what is in the payload of the message, the body of the message. And we also, if you want to do an adaptive card like we did, we do that as an attachment. So attachment has a content type in there of Microsoft.card.adaptive, and inside the content property is a big JSON blob. The next step is to install the chat install an app into either the chat or the meeting. So the C-Trade app created this chat, but we also want to make the C-Trade app available in the chat. So C-Trade is actually installing itself into the chat that is created. And I say chat/meeting because when you think about meetings, a meeting is almost a form of a chat. Every meeting has a chat. To install an app into a meeting, you actually install an app into the chat associated with the meeting. So you can really think of a meeting as a subclass of a chat. So the same trick you use for installing apps and chats works for meetings as well. And all you have to do to install that app is post/chatsID installed apps, and then you pass in the URL to that particular app ID. Once you have that app installed, you can then create a tab that uses that app. So here we go, post/chatsID tabs, and that creates a tab with the display name C-Trade. We tell it which app we want to associate with a tab. This is going to be, again, the same GUID we just used at the last slide. And then there's that configuration blob that differs from app to app. It's about app-specific configuration. But ultimately, a tab is at its center is an iframe, and these are the parameters to tell teams what to render in that iframe. So that's how you set up the app. On the topic of apps, let's talk about permissions for applications. If you rewind the clock 2 years, there was really only about 2 permissions for Teams Graph APIs. There was group read all and there was group read write all. Those were your 2 choices. You can give the app access to read access to everything or read write access to everything. which is an awful lot of power to one app to be able to read and write everything. So we've been on a journey to scope this down while still maintaining the flexibility you need to build great apps. So our first step, which we released about a year ago, was what we call granular permissions, where we created additional permissions such as channel message.readWrite.all. And that does what it says. It gives you the ability to read and write all channel messages in all teams, but just channel messages. Channel message.readWrite.all does not give you access to the files. It doesn't give you access to the team settings. It doesn't give you access to the membership, just the messages. And so that was a great step forward. But we wanted to do even better. We wanted to scope this application to one team, because if you ask about all teams, if you have access to all teams, the only person who can really speak on behalf of all teams is the admin. And so with granular permissions, we had a solution that really most of the apps required the admin to get involved to install them and approve them. But if you can scope it down to one team, that's when the magic happens. That allows a single team owner to give consent, because you're asking only about their team, not about every team, just their team. And so that's what resource specific consent did when we created this and shipped this last fall. And so here, this app has access to the channel messages in team 2, not team 1, not team 3, not team 4, not to any other parts of the team, just the channel messages in team 2. That's already generally available. And we're excited to talk about the next step in this evolution, which is resource-specific consent for chats and meetings. So this will be coming soon, and it will give you the same power. You'll be able to have apps that can read the messages in just one chat thread, or listen to the audio and video in just one meeting without having to give them access to all of your meetings in all of your chat threads. Here's the full list of permissions that we're building. In red, I have 3 of my favorites. There's reading the messages in the chat. There's managing the chat, which is to say adding and removing users and being able to retitle the chat. And then accessing the audio and video in a meeting. We'll be following, our first wave will be about the messages and the memberships, and then we'll follow that up with audio and video. Speaking of meetings, our app scheduled a meeting. To do that, we created a new event. The terminology in Graph is you have a calendar that is full of events. And so we wanted to create an event that has a subject. In our case, it was, rather than go for lunch, it was about FBKM, about FabricAm. That message, or that event rather, has a content body. It has the start and an end time. It has the list of people you invite. And in order to make it an online meeting, you specify is online meeting equals true, and online meeting provider equals Teams for Business. And that creates a calendar invite that has that Teams link in the invitation that you can click on and join that online meeting. It's also possible to create just a raw online meeting without the corresponding calendar event. And if you do that, you do post/users ID online meetings. You get to pass in less information because there's just less there. You only need the start time and the end time and a subject. And what you get back is essentially a raw meeting without any calendar representation. It doesn't show up on anyone's calendar. It's just the meeting link. And so we have a great set of APIs for working with both these events from the calendar and the online meetings. There's also the concept of a call, which is a meeting in progress. It represents your connection to the meeting, your video stream, if you will. There's APIs for working with the participants, for getting the audio and video media out of these events. And there's also a great API for working with the call records, seeing a list of all the calls that have happened in your tenant, along with some data that's great for debugging problems with quality. While we had our meeting, we saw an activity feed notification. Looks something like this, a little purple pop-up in our lower right corner of our screen that Fabricam stock went up 5%. That's a custom activity feed notification sent by our application. And if we'd gone into the activity feed, it's more than just a pop-up. There's also a full-on activity feed item, and it's fully custom. We got to customize that first line. Fabricam went up 5%. We customized that second line to point it to C-Trade. We had the option of a third line there, which we chose not to use. And then when you click on that activity feed item, that right-hand side experience, the right pane experience, is again fully custom. So let's see how we built that. The first step is to add a few details to your Teams app manifest. In here, we have to specify what are the different types of notifications this app can send. And this app can send two kinds of notifications. There's stock price went up and stock price went down. Those are the two notifications that this app sends. And when we declare those, we declare a template text, stock went up %. And so there's two parameters to that template, stock and %. And when we go to send an activity feed notification, we pass in those parameters. And the reason this data is in the manifest is so that users can always control these activity feed notifications. If we go into the settings page, after you've run C-Trade, you'll see C-Trade in there, and you can edit the settings for C-Trade and what notifications you want to get. You can choose banner and feed, which is the experience we saw. First, there's a pop-up, and then it shows up in your feed. You can also choose feed only. There's no pop-up, but you still see it in your activity feed when you go to your activity feed. Or you can choose just not to hear about it at all. As a user, you're always in control. So to send that activity feed notification, first you post to /usersID teamwork send activity notification. You pass in which activity notification you want to do. We did share price increased in this example. You pass in the values for those parameters. Stock is going to be FBAKM, percentage is going to be 5. And you pass in, and that determines that first line between the template parameters and the template that we specified in the manifest. That specifies what that first line of text looks like. The second line is what we call the topic line. And here we pass in the URL for the application itself expressed as a personal scope Teams app. So when the user goes and clicks on the C-Trade app in their left app bar, their app bar on the far left of the window, that's the experience that this is linking to. And there's a bunch of different possibilities that we support here for the value, but that's what we chose for this particular example. You can also link to messages. You can also link to a tab in a particular team or in a chat. There's a lot of different possibilities we're supporting here. And then that third line is the preview text is the third line of the notification. Usually have some kind of sentence in there like the first sentence of a message. We didn't have anything useful to say here, so we left it blank. Speaking of messages, let's talk about the APIs for working with messages. When you're in a financial environment such as stock trading, the SEC has laws about you need to retain your messages. There are laws about archiving your messages so that if there's allegations of insider trading later, the SEC can go back and read messages from 2 years ago and figure out what was going on and whether there really was insider trading. And so we call that compliance archiving. And the typical pattern is that compliance archiving apps work in different ways, but a good way to think about it is every night they go through all the users who are under compliance archiving and they enumerate their messages using the get all messages for that user API. And so that will get you all the chat messages that user sent and all the chat messages that user received. And you typically apply a date filter and you say, give me all the messages since yesterday, because I called yesterday and they got the messages from yesterday. So give me all the messages since yesterday. And you'll get back a list. And that list will tell you all the stuff you expect to know about those messages. It'll include reply chain information. It'll include who it was sent to. It'll include pointers to the chat thread it was in case you need to go back and reconstruct the conversation. And so that's the get/users ID chats get all messages. There's also a version of this for teams that will get you all the message in a particular team. All right, so that's just one of the messaging APIs we have. We have a full suite of working with channel and chat messages for the membership, dealing with cards and reactions. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that last line. We just talked about the message export, which we are currently in beta and looking forward to shipping soon, just as soon as we've fixed some last issues with how private channel messages are represented. And the other one I wanted to talk about is the import APIs, which were recently released. So for the import APIs, imagine that you have a bunch of messages in a competitor chat product. I know Teams is great, but imagine there's other chat products out there. And you want to get those messages out of that and into Teams. Well, in the past, it was really pretty hard to do this. You could kind of, sort of, not really do it. And so the import APIs create a great way of doing these for channel messages. First step is to post/teams with this new special parameter called team creation mode equals migration. And that creates a team in migration mode ready to do migration stuff. You do the same thing with a channel. You create the channels using channel creation mode equals migration, but it's otherwise the same channel API you've grown used to. And then here's the magic. You start importing messages. And again, the beauty is it's the same post/messages you're used to with new parameters. And the key new parameters here are, first, you get to specify when you're in migration mode and you have migration permissions, you get to specify the date time the message appears as if it was sent from. So I can send a message that pretends to have been from 2009 because you're an honest person and it really was from 2009, just not in Teams. Similarly, you can specify any user you want as this message coming from. So this message came from John Doe. John Doe, this is from 2009. John Doe probably doesn't even work at this company anymore. He doesn't have an Azure Active Directory account in our tenant. And yet you can still send a message from him. So that's how powerful the migration APIs are. And third thing is a little hard to capture in a parameter, but the volume you can do this in is much, much, much greater with the import APIs than you could ever do before. Previously, there was a cap of, I believe it was 3,000 messages per channel per day. That cap has been lifted. Because you're in migration mode, Teams is able to handle the volume much better. And the reason that migration mode makes such a difference is you have to call complete migration at the end. And before you call complete migration, no one can see those messages. So when Teams is freed of the work of having to show the messages to people, we can then take on a much greater volume of messages without suffering the consequences of so many messages coming through the system. So that enables some great stuff with importing your messages into channels. All right, wrapping things up. We talked about how to use the presence and the tags APIs to figure out who's available in your organization with a given skill set. We talked about the APIs for working with chats, how you can automate your chat lifecycle, creating chats automatically, adding users to them, installing apps and tabs, sending messages, and then reading those messages out when you're done. And how we already have the same sort of thing for channels. We talked about working with events and online meetings, how you can schedule a meeting using Graph. And we talked about some of the functionality available for messaging, some of the compliance archiving scenarios, the migration scenarios. We didn't even get into the data loss prevention scenarios covered by notifications, which allow apps to watch for words and data that really shouldn't be sent in messages and then flag those as a violation of corporate policy, such as credit card numbers and social security numbers being put into messages where they don't belong. So some useful links when you build your app. We have your link to Teams Graph and the larger Teams platform. We also have some great resources when working with Graph in general, and a link here for working with resource-specific consent permissions. Finally, want to just plug some of the other team sessions we have available at Build. Thank you very much and happy coding.